Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just give everybody another minute or so before we kick off today's conversation. We just see a few more of you folks coming in, so we'll give it another minute or two. Welcome. Let's give it one more minute. All right, Jason, are we good to go?
We are recording and we are good to go.
All right, awesome. Well, hello and welcome to CoachSource's first Friday webinar for September. Can you believe it? Thank you so much for joining us today, and a particular warm welcome to our current clients as well as I can't speak yet this morning, as well as those of you who are not yet our clients who are on the call. I'm Amanda Layden, the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at CoachSource, and I am honored to welcome Colleen Bastian, who is our guest today. Colleen, I'm going to turn it over to you real quickly just to introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Pleasure to be here. So my name is Colleen Bastian. I am an organizational psychologist based in the Washington, D.C. area and specialize in executive coaching. Prior to becoming an executive coach, I had a corporate background in sales. So my style is to lean on my business background along with my psychological training. And I've had this wonderful longstanding partnership with CoachSource since 2008. So it's really always wonderful to, be a part of anything that CoachSource does. And also have my own company as well. So I've coached, thousands of leaders in different industries and a wide range of cultures. And it never feels like a job to me. I'm very fortunate to what I do every day. So thank you for joining me on this initiative, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge that we're going to jump into in a minute. But for those of you who are not familiar with CoachSource, we're the largest pure play global executive coaching firm. We've been in business 19 years and have over 1,200 coaches globally that we deploy for leadership transformation, typically at the director level and above, including C-suite and board. We host these webinars on the first Friday of every month, so you're more than welcome to join us for all or more of them. And at CoachSource, we believe that inspiring leadership transforms organizations. These monthly gatherings are dedicated to empowering HR business partners, leaders of talent inside organizations with insights, strategies, and expert guidance on leveraging executive coaching to drive organizational excellence. If there are any topics you'd like for us to explore or to cover, feel free to email me, amanda@coachsource.com. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, Colleen, we're just going to go ahead and jump into the conversation around creating coaching cultures. So when you hear the phrase coaching culture, what does it mean to you in practical, everyday terms?
I mean, it's a great question, and I'm glad we're starting here just so we can all get grounded in what we're talking about when it comes to coaching culture, right? So I'll kind of start broadly, and then I'll get into some more specifics. But broadly, a coaching culture is really a coaching mindset. You can almost observe it after working in so many different organizations. It's sort of this felt way that you can observe when you're looking at these leaders and you're hearing them talk and how they talk about, development and so forth. So the first thing I'll mention is storytelling is really key. So as more leaders have experienced the benefits of coaching, for them to be sharing what they see as the benefit for themselves and for others, really does lend itself to, the sort of practical everyday terms, right? It could be the water cooler talk, so to speak, or just ad hoc, how it's benefited them or others. And then leaders who are, very self-aware and just have an openness and curiosity that inspires discovery and reflection through coaching skills that they've learned either from their coach or their peer coach or mentors along the way. That's something that you very much see in cultures who have a big coaching culture. They have a really good way of, deep listening. So kind of less on that telling or advising right away, but more on drawing someone out deeper and having those honest conversations and engaging folks. And really just sort of acting in a way that amplifies, collaboration and agreement and alignment and so forth. So it's definitely something that, you could kind of see broadly in how I'm talking about it. More specifically, just to get a little bit more detail here, those that have a coaching culture, the leaders really lead by example in terms of being very transparent about their own coaching journey. So they're fine to be vulnerable in a sense and share what their coaching journey has been like. I also like to think of it in terms of you could kind of see that on the spot coaching that happens a lot too. So understanding the viewpoint and intention of others, not being afraid just to have those coaching moments, in the halls or virtually very quickly. In addition to that, regular kind of management conversations that people might have when they're working with their direct reports. I'm hearing a lot of these mid-year reviews that are coming up, things of that nature, but really turning them into a coaching conversation and involving them in their own learning and development. Oftentimes, in coaching cultures that are less than that, you see them sort of telling their people more about how they can develop. But coaching is really, involving them and drawing out what they think is also best. So those are just, some things, but, tactically too, Amanda, certainly, mentoring conversations, culture of internal and external coaching, team coaching, group coaching, peer coaching, mentor programs. We'll get into sort of different levels of that, but you'll see that, they certainly have not just like an ad hoc program, but it's embedded throughout the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up for everybody to kind of start thinking about some of the pillars. We've outlined some pillars we'll be talking about later, and also where they might be in their maturity. So let's move to that real quick. So we at CoachSource have a kind of coaching maturity model. Jason, would you mind pulling up that slide? Thank you. So I think we can, Colleen, in what you just kind of outlined, you mentioned a few different ways that organizations might be able to see themselves in this maturity model from level 1 all the way up to level 4, which is really where we're hoping that organizations strive to get to. So maybe we can bring some of this to life for folks around what does this look like and how might you identify where you are in terms of this curve or in terms of this maturity model. So level 1, Colleen, you just mentioned, which was what we call casual. So the first, meaning more like ad hoc coaching. Are you still seeing this a lot, Colleen, when you're working with organizations?
Absolutely. To be perfectly honest, in my own practice, I see anything from level 1 to level 4, and level 4 much less so. But certainly there's, still folks that kind of come in for, hey, we've got this leader who's a fantastic leader, and we just, feel like they need some brushing up on these particular leadership capabilities, right? So certainly do see a lot of that. That still exists.
Yeah. And so if we just name the levels, so everybody's kind of grounded, and then level 1 is casual, level 2 is conditional, level 3 coordinated, centralized, and level 4 is like a true coaching culture where everything's embedded. There's group, team, internal, external. There's maybe perhaps a coaching center of excellence. And so we see right now, and Colleen, I'd love to get your perspective. We see a lot of organizations right now, especially as there have been a lot of reorgs happening, a lot of parts moving. There's a lot going on externally. Organizations are coming back to the foundations again in terms of building out what might this look like if we start to move towards a level 4. Is there any advice you give organizations on how to start building towards that level 4?
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. It's a good question. And I will say, it's not really a one size fits all approach, right? So anytime we think about culture change, it's like starting with the baseline of where the organization is, getting understanding. And CoachSource can, help folks on this call with that, right? Using the coaching maturity model. But figuring out kind of where you are is a good place to start. And then, think about the folks that are champions of coaching that within the organization. Gather a champion team, those strong advocates, and align coaching with the company values and vision, right? We don't want it to have kind of be this like thing that happens in a separate part of the organization, right? It really should be, within the fabric of the organization, and that champion team that I mentioned should have HR leaders, but also, other business leaders kind of coming together and thinking about, what are our company values? What's our vision for the future? And how does coaching enhance that so we can get that really strong performance that we're looking for? Another thought too is starting with a small pilot program, maybe just within a specific department. And Amanda, I can get to some specific examples, down the road, but of one that I've been working with where they did just pilot it within a department, and it's been really helpful, right? So starting with kind of like one-on-one coaching and group, and then that's turned into team, and now the department has really done such a great job of having that coaching culture because they've all been trained in coach-like behaviors. And then, a couple more thoughts that I would suggest is, expand on your mentoring and peer coaching opportunities. So that particular client that I was just referring to is a pharmaceutical company. And I, along with another colleague, within CoachSource, worked with these groups to actually teach them coaching skills. And in the groups, then we set up peer coaching for them. So not only were they learning it on their own, but we're having, activities to coach each other throughout the engagement. And what is wonderful about that is that many of them continued to peer coach each other because they now speak the same language and they can, support each other moving forward. So if you don't have leaders that really understand coaching skills, CoachSource, has, a lot of coaches that can actually help with teaching some of those skills, and that also can help create the culture that you're looking for. And then just really set that intentional modeling of those coaching behaviors. So it's one thing to learn for yourself, the leaders that are coached, another thing for them to use it with their teams to create the better performance. But it's really important if you're trying to get a coaching culture is that the senior leaders are intentionally modeling those coaching behaviors. And that will really help trickle down. The worst case scenario is when the senior leadership team is not on board with coaching, or they haven't had it for themselves, or they're maybe embarrassed about it, or they don't speak about their coaching. You want people kind of bragging about it, so to speak, because then that creates, it's cool to, be developing ourselves and things like that. And everyone has something to work on, and all of that kind of thing. So I think it's a mindset as well.
Yeah. Before we dig into some specific examples, because I love using real life examples so that, people that are working within these organizations, they might be part of one of those champion teams, they might be an HRBP or a business unit leader. I like bringing this to life so that they can start to understand what levers they might be able to pull internally, or how they might be able to put some other things in place. Before we jump into that, we're seeing right now that a lot of organizations, we talked about reorgs, that they're being asked to do more with less. Do you have any advice when it comes to, or thoughts, or or maybe real world examples you've seen where you've been able to see an organization still create a robust or maybe even a coordinated, centralized coaching culture with less, so to speak?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question. I have certainly seen that. The idea of kind of doing more with less, right? There's so much of that happening, and quite frankly, all the organizations that I'm working in. Um, to be able to work with leaders to help them to understand that, they themselves need to focus on their own well-being, right? Through all these restructuring and reorgs and layoffs that we're seeing, this one particular organization, some of the leaders initially would say, "Oh my gosh, I don't have time for coaching," right? Because they just are in it so deep, and their email inboxes were so full, and feeling like they worried about job security, for instance. So they should just be order takers and sort of take everything that comes in, and not really have a lot of boundaries. Um, Coaching actually can really help those leaders create the reflective space so they focus on their strategic priorities more rather than just whatever's being kind of thrown at them. So the whole concept of doing more with less through coaching, they can get a lot of clarity about, let's focus on the most important things and let's prioritize those. And deciding what they're going to drive, what can they do that nobody else can do, what they're going to delegate, what somebody else can do that they're currently doing that they don't need to be doing, right? And then what are the things that they're going to let go of? Meaning, sometimes I find leaders are doing specific activities like looking at several different reports when they really just need one consolidated report. So does that answer your question, Amanda, of what
Yeah,
you're looking for?
I think super helpful. And I wanted to go back to something else you said, which was about creating these kind of champion internal teams. Can you explain that a little bit more, and a best practice that you've seen in terms of being able to help support the coaching efforts?
Yes. So, anytime there's any initiative, right, where there's sort of a pilot program for anything, you want to have champions for it. You want to have those sort of early adopters, so to speak, that really do believe in it, because those particular folks, are in different conversations, right, and they can help folks see the benefit of it. So, creating a team of folks that either have been leaders that have been, feel like they've had sort of that big transformation coaching that's occurred for them. That's not just like developing, a skill set such as decision making, but maybe something, much more powerful where they feel as though they are, kind of changed in a way that really creates the ability for them to be better leaders. So, having folks like that on the team, certainly, learning and development folks who really understand a lot about, talent and what helps people. We know that coaching works so well. There's so much data to say that teams perform, not only one-on-one people perform better, but teams perform better, and organizations perform, better with it. And so folks that that really believe in it, that can champion other folks that might be less aware, or like I mentioned earlier, some folks that I still coach to this day almost feel embarrassed. They don't want their colleagues to know that they're working on certain behaviors because it feels personal to them, right? Helping them recognize that, for lack of a better word, this is cool, right? It's like we all have strengths that we're really good at, and we have opportunities. And so champions can kind of create that culture that will help them.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for bringing that to life. So there's one quick question in the chat. Natalia asked if we could explain at least two varieties of measurement for level 3, sure. I mean, those measurements could be anything like a CSAT, a coaching satisfaction survey. It could be, your own impact survey that we have. We also roll out an impact survey with most of our coaching engagements just to talk about the impact of the coaching on the leader. It could be some other form of ROI that you draw to the coaching tied to your business objectives or overall organizational strategy. So it just depends in terms of at that level when you're having a more coordinated, centralized coaching in terms of the maturity, what is important to the organization, and also how you're able to kind of tell that story back to the organization about the impact overall of what's happening with coaching across the board. So I hope that helps. If that answers the question. I don't know, Colleen, if you have anything else you want to jump in and say.
I think that the mini survey that CoachSource has is fantastic too. Some folks will use it anywhere from level 1 to level 4. I know CoachSource and all the engagements that I work on, encourages that. And what that, looks like in the mini survey is kind of going back to those stakeholders and suggesting, here are the specific development goals that the leader was working on. How much did they move the needle on their leadership, and how much did they move the needle on those particular development goals? And getting that kind of data can also be really helpful for the coach and for the leader so that they're not working in a vacuum, right? So oftentimes, one-on-one, you work with leaders, often virtually, and you don't always have a sense of, how much they have improved other than their felt belief around that or their bosses. But doing the mini surveys that CoachSource provides, that enables you to really know how much shift in their leadership has occurred with respect to those specific development goals.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
I'd kind of like to move to, I know, Colleen, you have just such vast experience in
Mhm.
helping to build out coaching cultures in different ways. And when we spoke the other day, we talked about 2 very concrete examples. I'd love for you to share each of those in whatever order you want. And Jason, we can probably pull the slide down for now as Colleen's chatting, then we'll pull them back up. I know there's one we talked about the other day in the service industry space. Do you want to share with folks kind of what that looked like and what you helped to create at that organization?
Yeah. So in this particular organization, it's always nice when you get to watch folks, or organization go from what CoachSource calls that kind of more casual, so ad hoc coaching, all the way until the level 4 where the coaching culture is really strong. And over the course of nearly a decade, I was working with a client and I was able to watch them. So kind of, an important thing to recognize is sort of wherever you are, we know that culture change takes a long time, right? And creating a coaching culture also takes a long time. But there are some things that can expedite it as well. So this particular organization actually created a center of excellence where they have internal coaches. So when I met this organization, they didn't have any internal coaches. They just had some ad hoc external coaches. And what they did was they actually brought together the internals and the external coaches. And in a sense, I don't want to say we trained fully. I don't know if that would be appropriate to say, but we really helped the internal coaches, who many of them were not, were just kind of getting their coaching certification, just getting started, and also really busy with having a lot of other work other than coaching. So we partnered up and we mentored them, and we didn't see it as a threat. We saw it as a way to kind of come together and support the organization. So this organization really leaned on us as the external coach cadre. They brought us in for lots and lots of meetings, I will say. And I and all the other coaches loved it because we learned so much more about the organization that we were coaching in. We learned how to speak the language. We learned about what was important to them. We knew the resources. So what I mean by that is even Amanda, when you were talking earlier about what about these organizations that are going through all these reorgs and things of that nature? Well, in this particular organization, I knew the names of the particular groups and things that they could use and lean on from a resource perspective that were available when leaders in the organization didn't even know oftentimes what was available. So this, again, leaning on your coach cadre to teach them about your organization, but leaning on them to then have the resources, understand the company's, vision, be able to hold up the mirror for the leaders in the coaching sessions who might not be upholding the company values, but bringing that back around and sharing with them sort of the importance of that. So that Coaching Center of Excellence was really a fantastic, initiative. And what I also observed, Amanda and others, that was really neat to see is I watched a lot of the L&D folks model specific behaviors that they wanted to see occur. So I would watch them sort of, speaking very quickly to someone, let me give you some real-time feedback, right? They had their language for how that was going on. So often I see in organizations where, oh, something happened in a meeting and you wanted to give someone feedback, but then you didn't get a chance to talk to them again and it got lost, right? Or by the time you brought them the feedback, it was not as understood and the details weren't quite there. So, being able to have those, regular feedback models that I saw them do so well, situation, this is the behavior I saw and this is the impact, things of that nature. I also would see at this organization, senior leaders in different forums get up on stage or just kind of talk casually about the benefits of coaching for their leaders. They would speak about things like performance and retention and ROI. And so folks really, saw the benefits of it. So in this particular project, by the time that the project was over, and again, it lasted nearly a decade, the organization was all the way to the right of your screen, that you shared, where, certainly level 4 and having internal coaching programs, external programs, peer coaching, mentoring programs, all of the things I kind of mentioned before. Yeah.
So I have a couple questions about that. Maybe other people are wondering. You said it took, well, the project itself took almost a decade, and you mentioned that you mentioned they started, they created a center of excellence. What was their first jumping off point? Was it a decision that was made? Was it something going on internally? Was it just, oh, we know we need a coaching center of excellence? Where did they kind of begin in terms of that maturity curve or model?
That's a great question. I think, and I'm not particularly sure, but I think what was occurring at that time was a lot of momentum with a lot of success with the coaching, a lot of retention, a lot of people feeling very invested in, where their numbers were really improving. And so they were able to really make the case to why they needed budget for that.
And was, how did you see them maintain the momentum of coaching and continue to get that buy-in and the support they needed?
I think because the numbers were speaking for themselves. I guess I don't think I know, because they were sharing the numbers with us, what they could share. And, it was very specific, and it was all sort of in the data. So I guess that would be the advice that I would give is, to have a robust system. I know CoachSource can help organizations think through that, right, about how they might have, a system to really demonstrate the ROI.
Oh shoot, I just had another question. It just left my brain. No, I think it's a fascinating case study to think about in terms of wherever organizations are right now. Where can they potentially begin? What might it look like? And what support might they need? Oh, I know what I was going to say that you mentioned. One of the things you mentioned was, really getting to have those meetings, being involved in the organization. We at CoachSource love when our coaches get to have kind of that face-to-face time with our sponsors or, the person we're partnering with in the organization to be able to do our coaching engagements. It really helps for our coaches to get embedded in the DNA of the organization, so to speak, and also to be able to help provide even more value to those leaders. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
I think it's really important that you bring it up again, Amanda, because the organizations that do that get more out of their external coaches, right? So they might think, oh, we don't have time to have this meeting, and how are we going to figure this out? But actually, CoachSource often does they run the surveys for their clients, and then they look at what value is being brought as seen by the external coaches, and then they also look at things like what else do you need to be more successful? And so to the extent that you can do that, I think is really helpful in bringing the coaches together where they can best practice share as well. So creating those forums for that. So the organization that I was referring to before, it wasn't just about like what they could learn from us, because of course they're just getting common themes. Everything is confidential one-on-one or in group, but they were also like being able to provide us with forums so that we could learn from each other, so we could up our games. And that's exactly what we were doing. So we were constantly just building off of each other all the time and creating more value for the organization.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. I want to switch tack for a minute and talk about the other client that you and I were discussing, and you alluded to earlier on in this conversation. Can you share a little bit about what that coaching program looks like, and how, is that specific department, how you've been able to develop more of a mature coaching model within that department?
Yeah. So this is a pharmaceutical company that are scientists, and it's been a really fun project to engage with you and with the organization, Amanda. And in this particular group, they started with group coaching and one-on-one. So I think it was around a 7-month program that we've done over a few years with this particular organization. But we would do monthly group coaching sessions with different topics that would add value to that organization. So starting with things like, self-awareness, and then emotional intelligence, and situational leadership, leader as coach. So giving those coach-like behaviors to these leaders, helping them be able to be more effective communicators and manage up and down and across, and also explore their influence. So those are just some of the topics that were important to this organization. And then in addition to that, meeting with the leaders one-on-one, which provides a lot of value and a space to go deeper. So the group sessions were, no more than 8 individuals, and then one-on-one at the onset of the program, at the midpoint, and at the final part. It was so successful that we had extensions, for 4 months, where they got to work one-on-one with us to go deeper onto their development opportunities. And so they got a whole lot of value out of that. They had stakeholder interviews, really helpful, and for some mentioned life-changing, I have to say. Many of them had not had coaching before. And then one particular department was getting a lot of value about it from both a group, so peers, and then one-on-one. And then they decided to do a department team development program that I led with them. And in that process, it was the coolest thing. We were on site, and you would see where the head of the department actually created, or I guess, just made copies of the model that I was working with that group on, so they all could have a better way to communicate with each other and flex their styles more. And he put it into everyone's office all around the department. And so I still coach with this particular group. And when I see them kind of go straight to, I need to go into this meeting and I need to communicate in a different way based off of the folks that are going to be in the room. And let me look at this resource and let me think through that. And the conversations that they have has evolved into what started with, we've never been coached and what is this about? And we're nervous about it, to, oh, wow, before you walk into that meeting, you should probably think through how you might flex your style more and work better together. So there's been a lot of success, and that's, just one example, but there's so many examples that I and other CoachSource coaches have that look a lot like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that example because we keep working with that department year on year. Thanks, Colleen, as a result of the fantastic work you've done. And the coaching culture truly has been embedded within that overall department. And so that's just one way to think about when we're thinking about where, an organization is, like, where are you on this maturity model? That's one way to think about it. Maybe it's not across an entire very, very large organization, but there are opportunities as leaders to help create that coaching maturity model, that coaching culture within even a specific department that has real world impact on that organization itself, in terms of what they bring to market, in terms of the solutions they offer. And so having those leaders be coached has been extremely helpful. So thank you for bringing that to light. So we've now talked about some examples, maturity model. What I'd like to do is get a little bit more tactical. And one of the things that we've kind of come up with are 5 pillars for organizations to think about in terms of developing coaching. Jason, would you mind pulling up that slide for us? In 1 second, technology. Thanks, Jason. So part of the pillars that we think about, and the title of this forum today was around these 5 pillars of a coaching culture. And so we've identified 5. It doesn't necessarily mean there might not be others, but these are the 5 that we've identified. So Colleen already mentioned executive sponsorship, and then governance, manager as coach capability, scalable coaching architecture, integration with talent systems, and then the 5th being measurement and ROI, which is one that I love to talk about. Colleen, is there anything in here, or if you think about if an organization wants to or can only start small, which of these pillars or approaches might provide, the biggest or quickest win to build momentum?
Well, based off the last example that we just talked about, Amanda, and you and I have seen that department totally transform in a very large organization that would be hard to, have the culture shift overnight in the way you can with a smaller department. I would say, if you can, based off of pillar 1, have that strong executive sponsorship along with pillar 2, where you could have coaches like the external CoachSource coaches teach those manager as coach capabilities. I mean, one of the things that I'm doing right now with leaders as I start working with them is just almost like right away, give them something like the GROW model, very simple coaching model, so that they can start to shift how they are working with their direct reports and others into less of that mandate telling them what to do, but more of that drawing out, leaning into curiosity, helping empower their leaders through exploratory conversations that get deeper. If you can do that with a smaller group, and you could use coaches to be able to teach you those skills in a small department, I mean, that would be probably what I would suggest. What do you think,
Yeah.
Amanda?
Well, I think you make a very valid point about the executive sponsorship piece, which is, in particular that example you just gave to us. The leader of that department was a huge sponsor of this program. He saw the value, he knew the impact this was having, and he was also modeling what was being taught and learned. The other thing about that is that as they were reorging, as they've done a few times over the past couple of years, that program has survived budget cycles, right? Because we had strong executive sponsorship, because we saw the impact. And then I also agree with you that, learning about how to have those, managers, coach capabilities has been really helpful. Like they dovetail so nicely together, particularly in that example you gave. And then I think the other thing for the third pillar is just, more and more as we talked about doing more with less, and the reorgs organizations are going through, we have our client partners coming to us asking, is there anything else outside of one-on-one coaching, and creating something scalable. We hear a lot about democratization of coaching right now in organizations, but also creating something scalable that allows, as you did, Colleen, with that example, that group coaching where you had 4 or 5 different cohorts. However, it's still scalable and people are learning the same thing in real time. They're able to have those conversations. I think that's also key to help doing something where maybe if an organization, if budgets are tight or they haven't, they're piloting something, as you mentioned, that's a jumping off point for sure.
I couldn't agree more, because it enables them to have that common language. Like, when we go back to that particular example, it's like they no longer felt like they couldn't have a coaching conversation, or that felt unusual or weird or different. It's like they were in a group together where they were learning those skills and building off of each other and encouraged to coach each other, which has enabled it to trickle out to others in the department. And as we continue to work with them more, we'll go through the program and be able to add value there. So it's really shifted the culture, over just the past couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So we could go into all of these ad nauseum, but I want to talk about a couple other things, and make sure we also leave some time for Q&A if anybody has questions. Also, if you do have questions, we are monitoring the chat. I probably should have said that in the beginning, but so feel free to pop any questions or comments into the chat as well. Jason, you can go ahead and pull that slide down. We'll pull the third slide up towards the end. Thank you. So what role, Colleen, do you feel that HR and business leaders play in terms of balancing like individual coaching or creating this coaching culture with kind of systemic culture change?
Yeah, so I mean, the role of the HR is, really kind of establishing that coaching plan, making certain that the goals are really clear, and the guidelines for what coaching means for the organization. Having some clear guidelines around that, I think is really useful. And then, as we mentioned, providing managers with the necessary skills and tools and training to be effective coaches themselves. Certainly they're going to want to, champion the culture. And then when I think about the role of business leaders, they want to be able to model that coaching behavior. HR and business leaders should do that. And, creating that psychological safety to allow folks to know that it's okay to develop and make mistakes, and, being vulnerable. And importantly, to connect it to the strategy, right? That this shouldn't be a separate initiative, but it really should be a part of the fabric of what they're striving for in terms of their vision, in terms of their purpose, and their overall company values.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So our last First Friday Forum, we talked about kind of what's happening in AI and coaching, and other things that organizations need to be considering. Is there anything, I know this is kind of I'm putting you on the spot a little bit with this question, but is there anything as companies are thinking about building this coaching culture that you think they need to take into account when it comes to the changes that are on the horizon, or presently with sort of AI and coaching?
Yeah, I mean, to embrace it, right? It's not going anywhere, right? We know the president was meeting last night at the White House with many of the big tech leaders and everything, right? And you even had Melania, I mean, regardless of politics, talking about, that the robots are here and they're not going anywhere, right? So this is like, certainly something that I've seen such a beautiful shift in the organizations that I work in, from kind of being scared of it to embracing how could it help them, right? I did it through CoachSource's 3-day strategy session recently with a marketing program, and kind of coaching them through how they can embrace and have a strategy that works for them, so they could perform together at their highest level. So I would say embracing it. I know that coaches are also embracing it and working together to see in a way that helps make sense for the organization, within the parameters, of course, of what is enabled through the organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you think about if a company were to start right now, let's say they may not have anything in place in terms of coaching, they're looking to start building towards that level 4 of the maturity model. They might be looking to put a couple of pillars in place. What do you think, what do you think the runway for that is to start building? And what do you think success could look like for an organization if they start today and kind of roll the tape forward into the future?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to say in terms of timing with budget and things like that, but certainly, success would look like, executives modeling, coaching like behaviors, right? Any kind of way that upward feedback, shows leaders kind of doing more of that asking rather than telling. So if we're seeing some kind of shift in the leaders and in the way that they're engaging people. Coaching is, also if it's kind of scaled across, different levels of the organization. So not just, preserving it for the top, but really thinking about, your high potentials and where it makes most sense. And making certain when you are thinking about scaling is that those decisions are made really carefully along with your strategy, right, of the org. Readiness for coaching should be increased. So less of kind of what I was talking about, sort of that embarrassment should go from embarrassment to bragging, in a sense of like, I just met with my coach and I had an amazing session, and I know the value that I can add here when I felt stuck before, that kind of a shift in conversations that you hear. And that the ROI is tracked, right? So that the performance and retention and promotions are all, kind of well tracked and observed.
What question should I have asked you that I haven't yet?
I think it would be good just to level set, right? Because we're talking about a lot of different ideas, and I'm not quite sure, what level each of these organizations are. But
we do have a poll that we forgot to pull up as we had. Maybe if we can pull it up and just real quick, if people are still want to kind of self-identify
where they think they are. And as they do that, I can just, share, just, don't boil the ocean, right? Like maybe pick that one, pilot or one critical use case, and then see how it works for you in your organization. There will be so much learning that comes, about from that. Making certain just to be really thoughtful around how you do it in one way, and then you will be able to learn from it and grow from it. CoachSource can partner with you on it. Make certain that you have a good sponsor of a program, somebody that really is going to invest, in it, and make certain to, meet with those coaches regularly. And then, measure the program and tell stories. have the storytelling trickle out. I mean, people remember
Mhm.
stories. We know that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that in organizations. I don't think we do it enough in terms of showcasing our successes internally, like leveraging, like, here is the story that happened with this leader, or even having leaders themselves, if, folks listening to this are responsible for their coaching programs internally, even people that are willing to have a short, quick 60, 90-second video recording themselves on your
Yeah.
internal intraweb, whatever you might have, to share success of coaching, to share what happened. I know we've seen obviously a lot of success with the leaders that we have coached, and I agree that telling the story is so powerful. So it looks like the few that have actually answered the poll most are kind of sitting within that conditional or coordinated, centralized area. So, I'm sure some of them are striving to get more to that embedded coaching culture.
Mhm.
But yeah, good to hear that there's some great efforts out there with organizations. Anything else before we open it up to Q&A, of course, and then close it out today? Feel free to type a question in the chat, to raise your hand if you want to speak to us, but would love to field any questions, especially given the wealth of knowledge Colleen has shared. But Colleen, any other parting advice or anything else you'd like to share before hopefully we get a